I mentioned that in 2001 we hosted an AZA conference here called Animal Welfare 911. In 2001, AZA as an organization did not have animal welfare in its vocabulary anywhere, and it's taken a lot of people, and obviously not just this organization, but a lot of people. Kind of bubbling up and to some extent also from the leadership to get to a different place. And about 5 or 6 years ago, Deb Luke joined AZA. She is the Senior Vice President of Conservation and Science. And we, a few years ago, immediately engaged Deb and then subsequently also asked her to join our advisory board for the Center for Zoo Animal Welfare, and she's been an active member of that. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I feel there was kind of a tipping point with AZA and its leadership, not just from individual institutions, but from AZA itself, saying we need to take this thing on. And that's precisely what Deb has done, and has been a fantastic partner. Was at our last symposium, at which time we do encourage different points of view, and you're going to hear some in the panel a little bit later. But we had some real harsh critics of the zoo world here last time. I'm not quite sure if we do this time or not, but Deb, defended the efforts and has proven that AZA is indeed totally committed to this. So we're very pleased that she's here to give a keynote. I'm sorry we're a little bit behind on the schedule, but please welcome Deb.
Thank you. Wow, thank you. Well, my slide's been up there for over 30 minutes, so I could be done and just take questions if you like. Okay, so as Ron said, we're going to talk on that really 30,000 foot level and talk about what AZA has been doing and how we're moving forward from an association level. Over a relatively short evolutionary time period, zoos and aquariums have evolved from a menagerie level, and I'm sure you've all seen photos like this in the past, to more conservation and education centers. Now, we're all here as experts. You are all more experts in welfare than I am. I'm supportive of welfare, and it's been one of the main goals that I've had in my position here. But in this short period of time, we've seen a huge amount of change. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And we're seeing more change that's going to happen in the very near future with both the conservation side from AZA as well as with animal welfare. So, with those changes, the Association of Zoos and Aquariums has clearly distinguished animal welfare as a core tenet of the organization. As our community has evolved, AZA strives to provide the infrastructure and resources needed to ensure advanced levels of animal welfare are maintained within our accredited zoos and aquariums. AZA's 5-year strategic plan identifies 4 strategic priorities, the first of which is caring for wildlife and wild places. Each priority has a definition to further elucidate its meaning and intent, and for this purpose, the objective is to ensure the sustainability of diverse wildlife collections in accredited zoos and aquariums, to advance the high standards of wildlife-focused animal care and welfare, we'll call that one out a little bit more, and to foster outcome-based conservation by connecting zoos and aquariums to the wild. This priority has several tactics identified to forward it, but the most relevant one to this talk is focused on animal care and welfare. And its objectives are to foster the advancement and implementation of animal care and welfare methods and standards for use by AZA members as best practices in maintaining healthy animal collections. AZA has placed the provision of best possible welfare for all animals in their care as one of their highest priorities. But this encompasses both ethical and scientific responsibilities. AZA accredited institutions have an ethical responsibility to ensure the well-being of the animals in their care. And the AZA community overall has a scientific responsibility to gain a greater understanding of the well-being of the animals in our care, and then to further advance animal welfare practices. So the AZA Animal Welfare Committee was established in 2000, and it was charged to develop a plan to formally include and recognize animal welfare as a central tenet of AZA's animal programs. Currently, the mission of the Animal Welfare Committee is to promote good welfare for animals in AZA-accredited zoos and aquariums by assisting our institutions in identifying and applying best practices in animal welfare and by promoting advances in animal welfare science. The committee itself has defined animal welfare within the AZA community to be an animal's collective physical, mental, and emotional states over a period of time, and it's measured on a continuum from good to poor. That's a big statement, and to further give an explanation of what that means or what the implications are behind that. An animal typically experiences good welfare when healthy, comfortable, well-nourished, safe, able to develop and express species-typical relationships, behaviors, and cognitive abilities, and not suffering from unpleasant states such as pain, fear, or distress. Because physical, mental, and emotional states may be dependent on one another and can vary from day to day, it's important to consider the states in combination with one another over time to provide an assessment of the animal's overall welfare status. To maintain the high quality of these practices, AZA uses science-based information to develop welfare-related accreditation processes, including standards, policies, position statements, white papers, and so on. They focus on different types of support, including welfare-related committees, scientific advisory groups, a variety of partnerships. And they've developed a lot of resources, including guidelines to develop an institutional animal welfare process, which you've heard some of already today, animal care manuals, assessment tools, grant funding for welfare research, and so on. The association level focus that I'm talking about is vitally important for establishing and maintaining a welfare-based infrastructure within the AZA community, but it also provides structure, tools, and resources for non-AZA accredited zoos and aquariums if desired. At this point, I'm going to provide you a bit more detail on each of these areas to demonstrate how AZA focuses on advancing welfare, but I want to point out that I'm not talking about how our members are utilizing these resources, some of the things you just did in that exercise, talking about how it's incorporated into our institutions, because tomorrow Don Moore will be talking specifically on just that topic. So when we think about that welfare-based infrastructure that I mentioned, we think that this provides a common understanding for animal welfare in the zoo and aquarium community. It assists zoos and aquariums in identifying and applying best practices in animal welfare. It encourages the development of research projects. It facilitates the use of assessment tools, we've heard a lot about that already today, to advance and monitor welfare on a consistent basis. And it provides a mechanism to better understand and influence public perception about welfare within zoos and aquariums, as well as elsewhere. So when we talk about accreditation, there's a variety of standards that have been developed to meet the animal's mental, physical, and emotional needs. For instance, the ones you see listed there, animals should be represented in a manner reflecting modern zoological practices and exhibit design, balancing the animal's functional welfare requirements with aesthetic and educational considerations. All animals must be housed in enclosures in appropriate groupings which meet their physical, psychological, and social needs. There's more to each of these standards with explanations that you can find in our accreditation standards, by the way. And the institution must develop a clear process for identifying, communicating, and addressing animal welfare concerns within the institution in a timely manner and without retribution. Now, these are just some of them. There's a plethora of additional AZA accreditation standards that have been developed which focus on other welfare-related areas, including enrichment, veterinary care, nutrition, preventative medicine, etc. Still looking at accreditation, there's a variety of AZA board-approved policies that have been developed around animal welfare, including those that you see examples of there. Responsible population management, the acquisitions, transfers, and transitions, you already heard about that. That is a recent revision of the AZA acquisition and disposition policy. But there are a variety of other policies that also support animal welfare. The AZA accreditation process is a sophisticated and quite rigorous endeavor to go through. Indeed, fewer than 10% of the approximately about 2,800 animal exhibitors licensed by USDA are AZA accredited. Right now we have 228 institutions accredited. Facilities have to submit an application, which takes many months to complete and includes very detailed information. Inspectors spend several days examining the physical facilities and animal collection. They interview staff and check records to ensure they meet AZA accreditation standards, and then submit a detailed report to the AZA Accreditation Commission. This commission then examines the application, the inspection report, and any external information received before they make their decision. To keep up with constantly evolving standards, facilities must go through the entire accreditation process every 5 years. So I mentioned support, and those of course are some of the AZA committees, and I've already mentioned the Animal Welfare Committee, but I wanted to put up a list of the current members of that committee, because many of those people are in this audience right now. So if you want to learn more specifically about the committee and what it's doing within AZA, feel free to talk to probably your neighbor sitting next to you, because they're all very involved. But other committees that are also related to welfare that you can see AZA has, the Animal Health Committee, our Conservation Education Committee, Field Conservation, Research and Technology, and our Wildlife Conservation and Management Committee. And underneath those are a variety of different scientific advisory groups composed of experts in those fields that look at all the different species within our zoos and aquariums. Other resources, partnerships, we work with a variety or all the other regional zoo and aquarium associations, a lot of the different zoo and aquarium centers that focus on welfare. Of course, we're here in Detroit, and Ron has made his role a leadership role in animal welfare. He mentioned about 6 years ago when we met and how we moved forward, and I've seen such a growth in this industry, largely attributed to some of the efforts that you've made, Ron, so that's very appreciative on your part. American Humane Association, we have a formal partnership, and I serve on their scientific advisory group also. So then we talk about the institutional animal welfare process. And we talked a little bit about that earlier. If you recall, one of the accreditation standards I mentioned earlier stated that AZA institutions must develop a clear process for identifying, communicating, and addressing animal welfare concerns within the institution in a timely manner and without retribution. And that's what these guidelines support. Within them, you'll note that the institution must provide a process for staff members to express welfare concerns that they have to managers, to provide a clearly defined channel of communication whereby welfare questions are reported, to provide, ensure that questions and concerns are reviewed, and to support managers in discussing welfare issues with staff, clearly articulating the steps taken or what needs to be changed. And they must record and highlight improvements made to the management of animals that they've that leads to significant welfare improvements. So another resource that AZA has is animal care manuals. There's a template that was made that's divided into chapters that can be edited, removed, and or added to meet the needs of the taxa or the species. The content for these animal care manuals is provided by animal program leaders and other species or taxa experts, including biologists, veterinarians, nutritionists, reproductive physiologists, behaviorists, researchers, etc. The information included is based on current science, best practices, and I would also like to say a lot of them and most of them and more of them are focusing on optimal conditions. Rather than minimum requirements, is what are the optimal conditions to meet those animals' needs. And they focus on animal care and management best practices with corresponding AZA accreditation standards specified in the sidebars. All animal care manuals are considered living documents that are updated every 5 years, and they're all publicly available. Now, these take a long time to produce by the animal programs, and this, in the last about 4 years, this is how many of them that have been published. There's a lot of them that are being published out there and have been very well received. Each one of these animal care manuals, we keep track of the stats on our webpage. Each one of these has been opened over 1,000 times, if not more, for some of them that have been there for a long time. So people are reading these, people are interested in these. We get a lot of comments back, particularly from other countries, from other places, of how valuable these are. So this kind of gives you an overview of how many there are out there at this point. But also, because they're so valuable, the chimpanzee manual was already translated into Japanese, unbeknownst to us, so we've had it proofed and made sure it was, was in a good representation of what we had in there. But since then, we've made this disclaimer for those that are translated, and all of the animal care manuals are currently being translated into Spanish by our colleagues in the South American Association of Zoos and Aquariums. Just to give you an idea of other ones that are in progress, these are all ones that are in progress. This is a big endeavor for our animal program leaders as well as for our office to have to go through and proof it. It typically takes all of those revisions, and it goes out for a public comment period for 30 days, and then we re-revise it again. So other support assessment tools, you've heard a lot about that today already. You've heard a variety of different tools that are used to monitor animal welfare. And they range from looking at natural behaviors to induced behaviors to physiological monitoring by identifying and minimizing negative affective states such as pain, fear, distress, and other key indicators. Physiological measurements of stress, especially non-invasive hormone monitoring, and different other tools like Welfare Track, which is a relatively new tool, but it allows you to look at individual well-being. So the AZA community continues to evolve and advance the science of animal welfare, and it was not lost on me when you talked about the elephant study, and so I said, great, I have that in my presentation. Let's talk about that. There are two multi-institutional collaborative projects that I'd like to spend a few more minutes discussing with you to illustrate how we're continuing to evolve as an organization. The first you've likely heard a bit about in the last year or so, and it's focused on elephant welfare. And in this, 255 elephants from 70 accredited institutions participated in this. And they were evaluated with respect to several key welfare indicators, including the ones you see there. And then population level descriptions for each of these indicators were generated. In addition, the housing, social management, husbandry, life history of each elephant was evaluated systematically over the course of 12 months. And many variables were calculated to capture the variability and complexity inherent to elephant management and care. These variables were used in regression analyses to determine those factors that contribute most significantly to differences in performance with respect to the welfare indicators. Overall, a range of performance with respect to each of those indicators was found, and a number of actionable factors were determined to contribute to welfare outcomes. These factors are now being assessed and modified in the course of elephant management such that successful strategies can be replicated and welfare goals obtained. The second one is a very similar study that is being designed to focus on cetacean welfare. Currently, there are more than 10 co-PIs with various areas of expertise who are developing this study. The species that will be included are still being determined, but it will certainly be bottlenose dolphins. And all AZA accredited facilities have agreed to participate in the study, and several facilities that are members of the Alliance of Marine Mammal Parks and Aquariums have also agreed to participate in this study. And again, key topic areas have been identified. There may be some that are still added, but you can see what those are there. And then, of course, the input variables such as housing, social management, husbandry, training, life history, and so forth, much like the elephants, are being finalized to capture the variability and complexity that's inherent to cetacean management and care. These variables will then be used to determine those factors that contribute most significantly to differences in performance relative or respective to each welfare indicator. But what we found already is that some of those indicators have to be validated still. So this will likely be the primary focus of a study coming up in the early 2015 is to start validating some of those. So now I bring you back, and I've kind of cut this short in the essence of time, but I want to bring you back to one of the first slides I shared with you. And I'm hoping by seeing this treetop level that you have a better sense of how the AZA community has advanced their focus and commitment to welfare over a relatively short period of time. One of the things I didn't mention and was reminded to me just a second ago is AZA's annual conference that they have is a very busy conference. There's a lot of different sessions going on simultaneously, but one whole track of that conference is animal welfare. Ron also mentioned welfare wasn't in any of AZA's perspective back 6 years ago, 10 years ago or so. And that last symposium I was at, it was brought up, welfare is not even in your mission. It's not. But the mission has just been changed, and it is now. So, and our strategic plan includes it. Yay, so that's good. So we are growing, we are evolving. I think it's really important to recognize that there are individual differences in our animals, and there are individual differences in us. So even those of you in this room that are the pure scientists in animal welfare have different opinions from each other. And certainly we have different opinions from within different zoos, within the public, and so forth. It's those differences and these conversations that happen that help us grow, that help us improve, that help us evolve. And so I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for sharing all of your wonderful works with me. It motivates me to go back home and continue to motivate our members and look around and talk to some of those people that are on the Animal Welfare Committee and learn more information about us. Thank you.
Thank you. Only if the microphone works. Terry. Project.
A couple of things that I've written and said before, so I'm just saying it again. But I've never said it to you. So one of them has to do with the way the elephant study was designed. And now that I see the cetacean study is going forward, the problem I have with centralized research, and I used to tell this to Mike Hutchins when I was on the board of AZA, I haven't changed my mind on that, is very often things sort of get filtered. The tough political issues don't get covered. The issue of how elephants are managed, free contact versus protected contact, was avoided in the elephant case for some methodological reasons, I understand. But we all know how delicate that issue was. In the case of the cetaceans, there are some other very delicate issues. And I understand that holders and people that are stakeholders in the future of managing creatures of that type might be very, very concerned about how these studies progress. The only way that I know to make sure that our welfare science is truly objective is to encourage individual institutions and individual collaborations with universities so that there is some more objective critical assessment. Recently, we have written a paper that's soon to be published dealing with protected contact and free contact, sort of the results of how that can be evaluated in a very small sample. But I'd like to see AZA not shy away from these big studies, but encourage a lot of replication, a lot of outside involvement, so that we can start getting into some of the delicate issues that we as an association tend to avoid. It's also the case that we should be more open with some of our more vociferous critics and allow them in the door every now and then. So I keep saying this and I get beat down for it, but a guy like David Hancock's, who has written some critical evaluations of us, I'd like to see him at a national conference, debate it, talk about it. We could make that happen, and I think it'd be very illuminating.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We've had many of those conversations inside AZA. You have to start somewhere, and I don't think 6 years ago the idea of an elephant welfare study with every member being involved would have even happened. And so in that short period of time we did, but yeah, you're right. Now how do we grow? How do we do more? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, how do we move it forward in different ways? Absolutely.
Thank you, Deb. Let's thank you and AZA.